Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, licensed presenters, both Michael Miller, presenters and affiliates. The Core New Core, my patrons, what a fine mist my patrons are in a fuel-starved carburetor. And finally, this broadcast is meant for anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. So, three things. Heavy snow continues. Embrace core new tension, lead the way. And inhale going away from center are the three things. And that was one pass on the carousel. If I follow my own advice and teaching and just make it about spaced repetition, just like I did there for my three things on the 5 things that I highly encourage you to familiarize yourself with and to be able to make a presentation of in order to add 2 and 2, meaning make money and find new clients. So heavy snow continues. I live in Colorado and Boulder County, but not Boulder City. A little further away than that. I grew up, or spent a lot of my time at the foothills of the Flatirons. Anyway, heavy snow in this country is unusual this early, and it's a matter of what? What is it, an inconvenience at all? In a big way, it's a matter of surviving, right? Because the temperature is down and all this snow shows up. It's impossible maybe to travel, or very much more dangerous to travel. You know, surviving can be a matter of weather. Now, spelled either way. Whether the way it snows or whether or not you survive. Same word, different spellings, different meanings. So, heavy snow continues. And then in my notes it was like surviving, and then surviving nature is the first thing. And here I am, here's much of the United States, much of the North American continent being flooded by cold weather and snow, and look who shows up at my door. Hello, Jonathan. Hello, Felipe. I'm observing you, observing me. And it's in the observing that we exist throughout eternity. Maybe that's how that should end. Past surviving nature, it just seems to be part of the world, part of the jungle that we're in. Part of the jungle that we're in is surviving man as well. You know, our fellow man is as much or more of a threat than nature itself. And yet man does a pretty good job overall of surviving collectively. And then another issue of surviving, I would point to within the individual. So you have to survive the snowstorms, and you have to survive threats from your fellow man, and then you also have to survive the threat within yourself and your encounter with reality, with you being biological, trying to survive in the reality that we exist in. And another way of saying that is the physics that we're trying to survive in. So we're on Facebook. Down in my feed, there's a beautiful video of Kirk doing teaser. Great control. Great replication of what seems to be an original expression, or the original work. Right? And yet, I always want to crawl through the screen and be the instructor, be the reflection, or ask for or point to something other than what I see. So how do you do that in it? Filippo, I think I got... How do you do that tactfully? How do you do that tactfully? The way I approach it is to say, okay, and I do. I like it. It's a beautiful expression of teaser. As an instructor, I would want to come in and instruct to do what? To give a person another way of feeling things, so that in their own listening, they can make a determination for themselves and find more control. As a Pilates person, I think we all get defensive about who we are and what we are, to the point of being judgmental, because we're not really confident enough in whatever we are and who we are, not to feel threatened by something other than I would say, and I say, all right, I would like you to, do you want to feel something different? Or do you want to go somewhere other than the control that you obviously expressed there? And so, in that situation where you ask permission to introduce something new, because maybe they don't want anything, maybe they, your student, does not want anything new at all, but only reinforcement and encouragement for what they're expressing. It's up to you to be the chameleon in that case. In any event, it leads me to wanting to ask Kirk to do a teaser. Was it shave the head? It was hard. It was hard, but what I came away with was that the hard part of the exercise was being done on the exhale. And that's, I think, where my number, that's my number 3 comment, sort of, but the point is, you inhale moving away from center. And in my question, and then when I said that in my text, I ask you why. Why do you inhale moving away from center? Both of you guys are really smart. Both of you viewers are really smart and have done some Pilates. Why do you inhale moving away from center? Coming up in teaser, up into teaser. Why is that an inhale? Now, I hear the whole chorus stand up and explain why an exhale might be viewed this way and be done for these reasons. What matters to me is that you know the source of inhaling away from center. Now I need a basketball that's partially inflated. In Joe's book, number 2, right after the definition, comes Joe stating the means of the madness. The means of what you're trying to do is contrology develops the body uniformly. Now, viewers, it's just, in my opinion, a fact of the matter that the biomechanics of core new tension are what they are. They exist. And it's through the implementation of core new tension, evolved over millions of years, that the body engages itself as uniformly as it possibly can. It's making tension between endpoints. And those endpoints are rotations at the hips, shoulders, and ears, knees, ankles, and metatarsals. This is where, when does it become knowledge? Because I had a viewer make a connection in the last week or so of, oh, CT is what it is, it's biomechanics. And it doesn't matter what my point of view of Pilates is, or your point of view of Pilates is, but I can make use of the biomechanics because it's just a fact of the matter. Okay, and so Jonathan and Filippo, what are the two main stressed by me things that you get out of core new tension? This is my hand signal for more engagement, more uniform engagement of musculature. The second thing is a sensation of alignment. Where does that sensation of alignment come from? Come on, now both of you ought to know this word that I want to use. Where does the sensation of alignment come from? Maybe not. It'll be interesting to see. So, the sensation of the alignment comes from tension. Where does the tension come from? 2 points or more that are interacting with each other. And in it seems to me that intense thinking no, I don't want to say it that way. Let me if core new tension makes sense to you, literally, if you can feel the difference in core new tension. Now, I spent time about, okay, I have a thread going on breathing. And where inhaling away from center comes from, it comes from the way the body engages itself uniformly. I would say physiologically, this is the primary axis of rotation is at our hips. Right? At our hips. And hello Flavia, I see you observing me, observing you. Oh, I've asked a question and I'm trying to remember the question. And the question is about why inhale moving away from center. Why inhale moving away from center? And it's because of the target of uniform engagement, and that the uniform engagement, how do we get to that? We get to that by engaging in core nu tension. What is that? That's, by definition, by my definition, core nu tension is oppositional rotation between axes. So this huge mountain of knowledge I'm claiming is a mountain is about biomechanics, and it's pointing to the fact that the human body makes oppositional rotation between axes, and in so doing engages the body more uniformly, or reaches into the ideal engagement of uniform usage. Whole body. I know, Jonathan, you're more student than teacher, and I take a bearing off of that in how I make my broadcast. But Flavia and Filippo, are in the teaching trenches. There you go. That's a good phrase. In the teaching trenches. And the more you teach and the better you become as a teacher, you attract a broader spectrum of students that, in my experience, really humbles me and puts me back on my heels when your student is so far beyond the spectrum of the bell curve where they're normal and healthy, but they have issues. And then you're a good Pilates instructor, but how do you take what you know as a good Pilates instructor to the individual? Now, I would say find encouragement in, it's much easier when you recognize what you are taking towards the individual, and that you aren't just applying general principles to the issue. So Flavia and Filippo, you might not, there's traffic. There's traffic going this direction. And all of this traffic is of people that have a background, that come to Pilates, and then if they become teachers or use it in any way to help others, it then becomes about the individual, because historically there is no explanation of what it is, and because of that, the best that people can do is taking whatever folklore they absorb and struggle to perpetuate the folklore in spite of its own nature, whereas an explanation of it is what it is based on what's here is going to do nothing but get clearer. Something that you can see for yourself. And the best part of all is that you can feel for yourself. So, when do you breathe in is the question. When do you breathe in? It could be 100 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people. Under a head mic, of course, but you know, when do you breathe in? When you need air. Everybody say that. When you need air. When you need air. How do you say that in Spanish? How do you say that in Italian? When you need air. But you are conditioning your student to listen to something that's organic. Pardon me if this illusion fails you. Illusion? In the book Dune, when they go to ride this great big worm, they run up to it and they open up a sensitive part so that the worm rolls away from that. Why was I going there? We're on this thing about, inhale. The control of the worm came from an organic response to itself. The source of movement for me can intellectually be connived, or at least with awareness. I can choose from my thinking to wait. Okay, to wait for what? I've used this a lot, but I'll bet none of you have heard this. You're in the spine stretch, and you're exhale, and you're reaching, and you're reaching. You're past reaching, you're past pulling your belly in any further, but you're reaching, you're engaging in the tension between ankles and ears, I might add. When do you come up? When you need the air. See, and that is the source of the initiation in MMP. I don't do it always, and it's not always this huge mental, overly controlled thing. But when you learn how to exhale in the spine stretch, and you continue your reach past the end of the exhale in time, then you can decide in your mind to come up, or you can sit there, stand there, and wait for the inhale bus. Because I assure you, it will come. And why will it come? Because the body takes care of itself regardless of what you're thinking sometimes. And it's only very rarely that an individual has demonstrated they can just exhale completely and die. According to some legends in India. But it's very hard to ignore the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic, automatic. And it's just a tactic within the overall strategy of a war of reaching for control. But in your movement, when you exhale all your air, and you're making your effort, you're listening to what? When you need air. And you derive a source of literal and beyond inspiration for the rest of the movement to come. What's the target of the rest of the movement? Contrology develops the body uniformly. Within MMP point of view, the way you do that is by setting up opposite rotation between axes. And from the MMP point of view, it's not an option. It's not just a way of looking at things. From the MMP point of view, core new tension is a fact of the matter. It's a fact of the biology and the way it accomplishes the physics. So when Joe says contrology develops the body uniformly, if you're serious about doing that, it really helps to be aware of the biomechanics of core new tension, because core new tension is the way the body engages itself to move through space. So, know those words. Know that description. Core new tension is the way the body engages itself to move through space. It's this all the way from ears down to metatarsals. And so with Kirk and the teaser, there's so much to take someone that's so skilled and so controlled. Being aware of core new tension, it can give you a lot of feedback that's new to people. Being aware that the point is uniform engagement. The point to be, contrology develops the body uniformly. Well, to me that means whole body. And whole body means uniform engagement of your musculature. And I'm pointing out to you that the way you get that biologically is through core new tension. So, all of you, what two things do you get off of core new tension? And to the extent that you know that in your mind, it just takes it to another level of depth, your comprehension. In core new tension, you get more uniform engagement. In core new tension, you're engaging ideally because that's the way the body does it for itself. You just have your understanding, your knowledge. So I would say you have knowledge of core new tension, and it's through your imagination that you engage in oppositional rotation between axes, and off of that you get more uniform engagement of your musculature. And the second thing is you get a sensation of alignment. And now I'm really picking up on where I left off and never really picked back up on again. Where does that sensation come from? Where does this come from? Well, it doesn't come from being completely relaxed, laying flat on your back. You have to engage muscles to get up off of your back and walk away. And the way the body does that is through oppositional rotation between axes, and in making the grip, what happens in that grip, in the making of the grip, it presses the axes away from each other. I don't have two things of suitable. So let's say that one of these is bigger than the other, right? And therefore, in a way, stronger. So the stronger grip would be at the hips. And usually, but not always, we're weaker in the shoulder grip. When you make the grip that is connecting, or when you connect the two grips, they press each other away. What is the name of where a curve changes direction? It's called the inflection point. It's a serious word that has meaning in math and physics and economics and everyday use. The inflection point, where the curve changes direction. When you've got a grip like this and a grip like this engaging itself, the purpose of the engagement is not to see, if you go deeper in the grip, you have to go. This is all just a visual aid. So is it this way or is it this way? It's this way, right? Shoulders to hips. My point that I'm trying to make is that the grips themselves and going into the grip creates more excess between them. So the oppositional rotation between axes is eccentric in and of itself. It's that engagement that presses the axes apart from one another. And it's in that engagement that you get as uniform usage as you're going to get, because that's the way the body does it. It's just a fact of the matter. So, is it Gusey or Jusey? I see you observing me, observing you. Welcome. We're talking about Pilates. And the reason that you inhale. So, Jonathan, I'll bet you have an answer for that, right? Why are we seeking to inhale as we move away from center? Because it's in the inhale that we come more uniformly engaged. Sorry if that took too long to get out. It's in the pursuit of whole body. You get the whole body more through the inhale than you do through the exhale. It's in the tension of the inhale coming into that makes us lighter in space than at the extreme of the exhale, due to lack of the distributed load through the distributed tension of the inhale. My way of looking at it. Okay? So, it's very fundamental in a way in that exhale is exhalation, is expiration, to the point of there is no more inhalation and you are gone. And from somewhere comes the inhalation, but it does. And as a human being, conscious and with knowledge of how to implement a tactic of exhaling all your air, intentionally triggering instinctual inspiration. So that's a famous alliteration of mine, maybe not famous, but I use it all the time. ITII, intentionally trigger instinctual inspiration. I'm not saying you have to do it as a religion and that it's overly done, because once you get the handle on exhaling all your air out and maintaining your effort in what you're doing and continuing to maintain that effort, you're in the gap between the end of the exhale and the beginning of the inhale. And when do you inhale? Hopefully in your own minds it came up when you need air. So I am being Yoda, sending them into the cave of their own experience. But while they're in that cave, what are they doing? They're listening for the experience of what? When you need air. And it's taking that as the source of the initiation, as the center that you're coming out from. The whole mat sequence becomes this wonderful, knowing what you're doing with your breath and why you're doing it comes from knowing the difference. And Juicy and I bet it's Giusy, maybe. So I think I skipped number 2. Embrace core new tension, lead the way. And that was more of a message to someone really capable in their movement, or at least capable enough to be able to engage in core new tension. So at least do it both ways and feel for yourself. And let that inform your decision about what you represent as Pilates and what you know about Pilates. Because it's about Pilates because you're seeking to develop the body uniformly. And it's about your knowledge of the biomechanics of the body that are what gives you your uniform engagement that you're after. Core new tension is the way the body engages itself to move through space. And here it is, almost 2020. And yet most of humanity doesn't realize or admit or come to grips with the grip at the hips. And that yes, the body engages a rotational dynamic at the hips. That's just half of the first step of getting to core new tension, because as soon as you get to, yes, the hips are a grip, then there are interactive grips defined as core new tension because nobody else had a name for it until I came to identify with it or point out what's happening. And it's been my joy to have that experience in my own body and be in terms of feeling my body lighter in space. Just so in teaser. So Kirk has an opportunity, from my point of view, to make an expression of the teaser that's more MMP than classical, for sure. By virtue of what? By inhaling away from center, if that's one thing, but especially by going unlocked in the knees and demi-point at the toes. So Jonathan, if you're still here, it's on my list. It's brewing, as I need to be able to hold up a picture of Joe that you sent me, so I can say, in Joe's book it says one thing, and in Joe's picture he says another. So in my closing, I come back to surviving. Surviving. So Juicy, Joseph Pilates was a survivor. His method is survival training. What we're trying to survive in is a gravity jungle. Gravity is a uniform medium. That's why it's so important that contrology develops the body uniformly. Because the more uniformly we can be engaged, the more we can swim like a fish through an ocean of air. Because we're as light as we're going to be, given our ability of muscular engagement. That sentence went off into nowhere. In surviving, I would point out two things. There's knowledge and there's experience. So knowledge is about what you know, what you got going on in between your ears and your thinking. And experience, see, part of me wants to take experience off into what you know through your amygdala and hippocampal areas of the brain that are imprinted or evolved into, right? Nurture and nature and all. In MMP, this matters a lot. And what is this? This is me observing. Observing. You are observing. Whether you're here or not, you did at one point. But it's the observing, perhaps, that makes it real in a very special way. If not, makes it real at all. But in MMP, the three things from Joe's book, his definition, his statement, and his sequence, are what MMP stands on. I need a big picture of Machu Picchu. It's the rock base, is Joe's own words. And from Joe's own words, you can get to an experience. And beyond the experience, or not as part of, but I don't know, the biomechanics that contributes to the experience that you're after, the experience is what? Contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. Yes? In MMP, that's complete coordination of being, thinking, and observing. And it's not rocket science, because the being is your beingness and your thinking is your prefrontal cortex. The being is your body alive, and your thinking is your prefrontal cortex doing its thing. And in MMP, spirit is observing. And observing is what's going on when the amygdala and the hippocampal areas of the brain feed information into what's going on in the thinking. I have to respond to let you know that it seems to me that my audience, you can come and then still be in the list of watching until somebody else comes back, and then all the people that are still watching show up as well. And the person that I think just showed up is Patty. Patty, I'm observing you, observing me. In the wonder of the galaxy. I had a pretty new viewer, Juicy, and we were going through the 5 things. What 5 things? I haven't said that. So, Juicy, I want you to be able to be a presenter. And a presenter just goes over 5 things. 3 from Joe and 2 from me. What are the 3 things from Joe? Well, his definition. The very next paragraph says, Contrology develops the body uniformly, right? I take that to mean whole body, and whole body means that see, the gift of Michael Miller Pilates is that it comes with the identification of the biomechanics of core new tension. And core new tension is just oppositional rotation between axes. And that happens in the body over millions of years of evolution. This biomechanics is what's going on. It's the way the body engages itself to move through space. What's sad about Pilates is that so much of it, just like so much of humanity, just exists within a realm of thinking, for the most part, right? It's all intellect driven, and there's no consideration of anything outside of thinking. And there's the irony, and that's the secret sauce, Juicy, is that an MMP observing is not thinking. Observing is something other than thinking. Joe said body, mind, and spirit. He didn't say or write body, mind, and more mind. So in naming 3 things, body, mind, and spirit, if you take off on the word spirit and discuss spiritual matters, that's all intellect, that's all thinking. So in MMP, spirit is observing. Spirit is observing. It's what happens when amygdala and hippocampal areas of the brain participate in or feed information into the thinking that the thinking pays attention to. Joe writes, completely coordinated on the purpose of the exercises as you perform them, right? What are you concentrating on? And what does it mean to concentrate? To me it means a lot that you concentrate on the quality of your effort as you're doing it, to improve your effort within the process. If it's all just thinking, and it's my thinking telling you what to do, telling you what to do, telling you what to do, that's one level of instructor-student. And sometimes a person will tell me, Mike, I don't want to think about anything. More than not, they'll say that. But I've gotten better at disguising what I want to teach to making it whatever they want to do, or whatever experience they want to have, like don't want to think about it. I had a lovely, lovely elderly client who had been doing Pilates for maybe a couple months and was taking a lesson from the visiting instructor. And right off the bat, she had this attitude, don't try to make me do a sit-up. I can't do a sit-up. Okay. We're on the Cadillac doing knee folds and curl around the heads and timing breath and just doing all the little pieces. And then, see, it's not just the pieces, but it's the timing. It's the timing of the delivery of what you do, or how you move, or your participation as an instructor. But through the course of just doing all these little pieces, she found herself sitting up, staring right at me. And I didn't make a big deal about it. The point had been made, and we went off to do something else. And eagerly so, because we had accomplished, without thinking about it, what in her mind she believed she could not do, and had been made to feel self-conscious about it. So the quality of your effort depends on the quality of understanding of what you're doing. And in that, the timing of what you say in terms of your cueing, to allow a person to engage themselves the way you know they need to in order to accomplish the movement that you're after. But that's a long process of learning and developing strength. But as the instructor, everybody wants their results right now. All you can do, all I can do, is cue toward the empowerment of control that accumulates to bigger and bigger levels of control that are more refined, right? So, I never mentioned that, well, the three things from Joe, definition, whole body, and the sequence. The definition of core new tension, we've covered a lot in this broadcast. And then the definition of MMP. And MMP is a definition of Pilates that comes from where? It comes from where? It comes from a theory. It comes from a theory that Pilates has an essence of its own, and that you can get to that essence just from what Joe wrote in his book, just from these three things. It's a definition of Pilates that's just based on a theory, and there will be other theories, as well as other points of view throughout all of the folklore culture. Expect more theories. Expect more thinking. In some ways, expect more attempts at thinking, bullying itself into significance. Which you and I know that that really can't ever happen, because in MMP, it's about coordinating capacities beyond just thinking. You're being, you're thinking, and you're observing. And observing comes from somewhere outside of your thinking. And in MMP, that's your amygdala and hippocampal areas of the brain. So in MMP, the explanation of Joe's definition is three parts of the body coordinating together as a state of being in the body in the moment of the doing. And that was the other thing I wanted to ask Kirk. I ask you all, are we on the same page at all that Pilates is an experience? Meaning, is there a complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit that you at least reach for and find brief glimpses of, and seek to be able to be more there and present in the moment, in the complete coordination of those capacities? See, in Pilates, you pursue the choreography, you pursue the performance of the mat. And the clarity as a Pilates instructor, knowing what you're aiming for, even if the student in front of you will never do a single mat exercise. of Joe's from this book. That's what everybody wants from Pilates. They want to understand enough about it that they feel they can speak the language. So this book is about grammar, where most of the Pilates culture is about words. The definition: uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. That's not the ultimate bottom line fact of the matter fact at all. That's one point of view out of yours, mine, and everybody else's. Core new tension is just a fact of the matter. Michael Miller Pilates is just one point of view. The only thing that really exists in the history of Pilates is word of mouth passing on exercises. Even to this day, I think, even to this day, the entire Pilates culture looks the other way as far as seeing relevance to what the exercises are and the order that they're in. So in number 5, uniform eccentric loading. Well, eccentric, uniform, we have talked a lot about uniform. Eccentric, we could talk a lot about that and already have in a way today. Loading, look at the exercises and the order that they're in. It's like stacking blocks, but instead the body takes on more weight of its own. When you start on your back and end up standing, loading. Flowing through. Not only film of Joe filming his mat, 40 years apart by the way, same exercises in the same order, all the way, and also in flow, flowing from one to the next. There's a lot to that, but we aren't going to talk about that today. And then progressive patterns of movement. Flexion, extension. The human body, what's Allen's phrase? The midline on a plumb line. Midline on a plumb line. Human body in space, you can define it once you know what you see. Being an MMP presenter or an MMP licensed affiliate is a claim by the person that makes the claim that there's an official recognition to what's behind the brand. So I think it'll take a couple more lifetimes for any relevance really or breadth of the point of view happens. But because you watch, because you make observe, I end up feeding back energy through you, each and every one of you. I keep coming back to the word knowledge, and that knowledge is what I'm trying to share with you. And in my ending, when I say evaluate points of view, right? I'm saying evaluate points of view of Pilates. That's all I really care about. That's all this broadcast is about. And recognize similarities and differences in points of view. When points of view come from someone that worked with Joe and a lineage that follows thereafter, that's word of mouth from generation to generation, and that's defined as folklore. MMP steps outside of or beyond or different than folklore and professes an explanation of Pilates based on a theory that Pilates has an essence of its own. In being a presenter, the three things straight from Joe out of his book. Anybody that wants to tell you, oh no, that doesn't matter, or that doesn't mean anything, right, is completely wanting to have you abandon solid rock foundation. And so knowledge. And then I'm trying to set up a comparison between knowledge and experience. But then I get into trouble as far as what is experience and how much of your history of experience plays into the experience that you're currently having as an experience that is what is in the moment. The flowing through in the definition, number 5, the flowing through part of the definition acknowledges you do Pilates without stopping. You flow through from one exercise to the next. And in 2019, you don't even get a message that there is structure and order to the mat, and that from that structure and order, you can obviously make up stuff as you go along that resonates with what's already there. Part of it being an idea is whether or not you can implement the idea from its comprehension on your own. So look who's joined us. Is Ollie, I see you there. I see you there. Maybe you've been there for a while, but I'm observing you, observe me. And what seems fascinating to me, and I'm trying to give you feedback about how the mechanics of this work, when somebody new shows up and there are people that are still listening, they show up as watching again. And that's humbling, I thank you. But hopefully it's because you're interested in what's being said. And surviving is always a great place to come back to. It's like base. What is Pilates? Pilates is surviving, right? Why is it surviving? Well, talk to anybody that actually knew Joe, and they hold some significance in their description of him as being a survivor. And his efforts from having been a survivor or surviving are geared toward the continuance of that condition, meaning surviving. so much of the culture, in its effort to treat Pilates as having no essence of its own, totally lose whatever essence it might actually have, or completely suppress the actual essence of what it is. So in this broadcast, I try to share with you the knowledge that there is a point of view other than folklore that offers an explanation. And the explanation is based on Joe's book and explains Pilates to be what? So Flavia, Patty, Ollie, Giusy, Jonathan, Filippo. In one word, what is Pilates? Pilates is an experience, according to MMP, and that's just one way of looking at things, but it's a good way, it's a very powerful way to understand. Pilates is an experience. What is the experience? We're going around the carousel, right? You've heard this before how many times? And you just want to hear me say it again to validate in you your knowledge of what's coming. See? And why is that? Because it's great when you can predict what's about to happen. And why is that important? See, why? Because in being able to do that, it comes back to surviving. And the observing that you see happen when things become familiar, it's not until things become familiar that you have any hope at all at anticipating what is to come. And all so often, anticipating what is to come is necessary to survive. You know, you didn't see it coming. Well, maybe you did and maybe you didn't, but a lot of times if you want to survive, you want to be able to be familiar with what's coming or be able to anticipate what's coming. Why am I saying this? Knowledge. Because we're talking about surviving, and I'm talking about knowledge, and that and that with knowledge it's important to evaluate it. Okay, I see where this is going now. And then in what you know, how to make use of it. Remember what my great-grandmother used to say when we as children would be so proud or bragging about something. She would say to us, Smarty had a party and nobody came but Smarty. Smarty, meaning you're real smart and you know everything, had a party, but those smarts didn't attract many people evidently because he was the only one at his party. That's great, isn't it? If I could have made a better job of not being smarty in order to have people come to my party in terms of embracing core new tension and leading the way other than me, I'd have done it, but I don't know how to do that. I warn you though, especially Jonathan, you strolled by here, in knowing what you know, KWYK. There's a lot of people, not a lot, there's a few, maybe one or two, that have learned the point of view of MMP and CT, and they use it without acknowledging it because it's easier that way to fit in and survive, to not be a threat or to be seen as a threat. So in using your knowledge, how you make use of your knowledge is a lot about, what kind of attitude you take toward yourself and what you know, and the results that you get from pretending like you know it all, or you're superior in what you know, to just saying, hey, look, I have another point of view to share with you. Just one point of view, mine, yours, everybody else's. But then being able to understand MMP for what makes it different. It's an explanation based on Joe's book. It's not anything to do with word of mouth from Joe since Joe. And then a distinction between knowledge and experience. Because we all stand naked in the cosmos in the moment that we're in. Maybe not in our mind's eye naked, but it's just us. And it's just the moment. And Pilates is what? There's so much hope and trust and expectation and excitement, generally, in someone that wants to take a Pilates session, from me anyway. And guardian and guide comes to mind, right? Guardian because they can get hurt. I can get hurt. And so guardian because I'm the one helping someone else seek to do Pilates. And both of us are at risk. They sign a release, they have insurance. I have a release and I have insurance. People get hurt. It's about surviving. And in the attempt, nothing is worse and more common than someone that has a decent body get involved with Pilates, and especially Pilates equipment, like the reformer, and find themselves injured. And in my opinion, just a broad guess at things, they find themselves injured because they haven't learned how to skate on ice and not fall through by becoming too heavy, or skating where the ice is too thin. And this whole thing about Pilates being corrective exercise, and somebody didn't like the word corrective, but by being interactive, by being responsive to your movement. And in the response, knowing how heavy you are in space, and knowing when you're about to lose your uniform engagement, because your loading has exceeded your capacity to stay uniformly engaged. And so someone very strong and able or very flexible or whatever, but the trick is to not lose your uniform engagement, because when you do, you break, you lose the uniform participation that you're after, and in so doing, you're vulnerable at points where you incur stress, like when you break in your back. I know, I hear you asking me, what do I mean, break in the back? So, Juicy, how do you get from the rib cage to the hips? How do you travel from the rib cage to the hips. How do you make your connection from the rib cage to the hips? If it were an airline, what would be the initials? TVA. I fly the TVA to get from the rib cage down into the hips. It's the TVA, the transverse abdominis, that is your major connection between these two rotations. So Patty, you've been listening forever in terms of time frames. Okay. I had a conversation with a friend of mine recently who earnestly told me that in America nobody cared about Pilates anymore. Nobody cared. Nobody gave a bleep, right? They've all moved on to whatever else. Pilates has lost its interest and nobody cares anymore. And the interesting thing that came out of that was what? That, and especially I asked, well, what about 4 years old to 24 years old, that generation, Gen Z, what do they want? And she said they only want one thing. They only want to be skinny. That's the only thing they want, is to be skinny. And way down on the list, in second place, is to look good. And then right after that, maybe to look pretty. But skinny, just skinny. Okay? I want to sell my view of Pilates to the youngest generation possible so it will last and grow and be maintained for as long as possible. Just like any good religion or training or whatever. If all they want is to be skinny, here's the tagline, the punchline. There's skinny, and then there's cornu skinny. Anybody can be skinny, anybody can want to be skinny. But there's skinny, and then there's cornu skinny. So, if this shape is our body, they're skinny by squeezing together, right? Pull your stomach in, squeezing together. And then there's cornu skinny by knowing enough that you know that you can engage a grip at hips and shoulders, and from cornu tension between hips and shoulders, you can do cornu skinny. So much of the culture today is based on the word of mouth lineages from people that worked with Joe. And much of that will want to continue doing that just that way without any interference or intrusion of looking at things that way. And to that extent, I would consider them historical recreationists. See, what year was this book published in? You ought to know that. 1945. Okay? That's Joe's book. 3 things out of this book with the words in it. Jonathan, right? The words are in some of these books, and others, they just have the exercises and not any of the text. Where can you go to read the text that comes before the exercises? michaelmillerpilates.com. How long have you been able to read that text there? At least a dozen years. How long have the pictures that I took that represent Joe's work and more contemporary in that the math that I learned, which has a few more exercises than what's in here? But pictures, all on the web, all available to anyone for over a dozen years. My point is, it's becoming more and more obvious that the MMP POV is a standard in the world because of the information, the knowledge that's on the website. And maybe I'll never get this right, but I created a picture book of all the reformer exercises. Everybody wants it with levels and detailed descriptions, and they want it by Amazon for $7 tomorrow. It's a lot more expensive than that. But I'm getting better at learning how to order it into a FedEx to enable you to go pick it up. Now, so Flavia and Filippo and all of you that are living outside of country of the United States, I thought FedEx had the ability to print wherever they are, but they don't. But if you have a FedEx that has a printing station, we can save enormous shipping costs. Oh, I brought up books. Joe's book, 1945. 13 years after Joe died, in 1967, 1980, this book, From Whence the Principles Came, you got to watch. So all of you that are new that don't know this, go on YouTube, search for Gail, G-A-I-L, Eisen, E-I-S-E-N, Pilates. And you'll get an interview of one of the co-authors of this book. A great insight into where the principles came from. A stab at trying to describe what they admitted they could not explain. 1980. 20 years later, my book pointing to another way of looking at things, besides just relics in the attic, both of these came out in the year 2000. I think that's sort of amusing because what the person had to sell was a bunch of relics in the attic, especially when the word ended up being deemed unpatentable. So what's the difference between 45 and 2000? 55. 55. You know why everyone is still here, or the fact that everyone's still here is a lot due to Cecilia. Hello, Cecilia. I'm observing you, observing me. Make our destiny in the cosmos. I'm doing books, and I'm doing dates. So 1945, 55 years later, in the year 2000, a different point. In the year 2000, this is an explanation of this. Not trying to live up to a vague... This makes Pilates whatever you want to make of it, and whatever principles you want to describe it as, because there is no explanation of Pilates from this point of view. admitted by the author. They got no explanation, or they could make no explanation of Joe's work, of Pilates, based on Joe's book. MMP is an attempt to explain what's in Joe's book. So it's not just made up, it's saying, here's what Joe says, this, and this, and based on that, you can get to this, and experience, and understand what the experience is, why it is, what it is, and how to aim for it as an instructor or student. You aim to do the mat. But if you don't know the mat, then you do know the definition of MMP, which tries to explain what's in the mat, that you can apply to anything. When you understand the ideal, you can apply it in any way you wish. You can use the ideal to justify the way you like to do it. See, that's the whole thing is, you want to survive as a Pilates instructor? Well, good luck with that. Because I think it's going to be more and more difficult to make any kind of distinguishment between who you are as a Pilates instructor and everybody and anybody else. And yet, the big distinction between word of mouth and explanation empowers you with a point of view. Just know, see, some people have shown up and it was enough just to find out that someone had an explanation, that an explanation existed. (1800), Schiller and the play Death of Wallenstein. 1800. So 145 years later, Joseph Pilates took a quote out of this book on a watercolor and hung it in his studio. Es ist der Geist, der schießt den Körperbau. This, thank you to Tanya, is a translation of the entire play of this Death of Wallenstein, in which this quote exists. I know it, but I like to read it as well as I say it. It is the soul that builds itself a body. So if you want it in English, it is the soul that builds itself a body. Now, I'm not very religious, and I don't indulge in paying much attention to soul. I much try to deal with the body that I'm in and surviving in it. My comment would be that if it is the soul that builds itself a body, and how it builds it is with spirit. Soul builds itself a body with spirit. Spirit is observing. you have to pay attention. You know, Joe's, how deep or how shallow do you think Joe's title of his book is? Return to Life Through Contrology. Right? (1800), 145 years later, Joe. 55 years later, Freeman and Eisen, who were conduits of Ramana's inspiration, and 20 years after that, an explanation. So in whatever year or century or millennia you're in, an explanation showed up in the culture of Pilates to forever influence thereafter how Pilates is looked at. You can stay within the realm of historical reenactment. You can stay within the realm of intellectualization where there is no acknowledgement of the role of observing in the pursuit of the doing. There is no acknowledgement that there's uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. So, Ali, what is that? Ali, what is that? Uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. What is that? Where did that come from? That's number 5 in being a presenter. See, Ali, I think of you and how long we've known each other and how much you've done and contributed to Pilates. Has it dawned on you yet how, in my point of view, how significant it is that you're aware of core new tension, and that's about every human being, and you don't need to pay any attention to MMP to make use of and find value in the knowledge of core new tension. So, after Mr. Gow, is it doctor? After the author of this book came out in the year 2000, there's like a split between the stuff that's in the attic and stepping beyond the relics to an understanding of what it is for what it is. There's folklore and there's theory. The great thing, the wonderful thing I think about MMP is that MMP says there's an ideal right here within Joe's book. To whatever extent that is true, what does that preserve and hold as a center of gravity, as a foundation of what Pilates is? I think I'm watching the aristocracy being blown away in the wind, gone with the wind, because of how much and how many people and money to where all of this diversity in Pilates that exist in expression, lineages and brands and manufacturers and filtered points of view of Pilates. Filters like dance and physiotherapy. The more you know, the more, actually, the more times around the carousel. So the point I was headed toward, Ali, is why not be a presenter? You don't even have to be involved with me, but hold yourself out and do a presentation. And that presentation explains two things. It explains CT and MMP. And if somebody says, well, I don't even know what that is, the next level of explanation is a general description. CT is about biomechanics. MMP is just a point of view of Pilates. And it's like, well, I don't care about either of those things, then you don't need to worry about it. You know you don't want the presentation. It's like a movie preview. The third layer of depth is that CT is the name core new tension and MMP is the name Michael Miller Pilates. And that's enough for a person to know if they want you to make a presentation explaining those two things. So, if I haven't lost everybody, recently I had someone write to me and ask me a question, and I felt that my answer had value, so I suggested $10 for 3 comments and gave a PayPal address. In some way, I'm sure that was shocking and an affront. But see, that's my message to you, and we talked about it got dark a little bit yesterday, but recognize when someone is pretending whenever you can. And recognize when someone's asking you for information that's part of your profession. It's part of what you do and part of what you get paid for. And so you can politely offer to share some information or your knowledge or your point of view for the terms that you set in the moment that you're in. And then that offer expires after you made it. And it wasn't taken right then and there. And see, in being a presenter, if all you care about is presenting core new tension, well, okay. I have a workshop outline for that I've only roughly gone through before. But when I say 2 mountains of knowledge, last week somebody said, oh, like I can embrace core new tension no matter what my point of view of Pilates is. It's like, yes. Why? Because core new tension is biomechanical. It's the way the body engages itself to move through space. And you all know the definition of core new tension. Oppositional rotation between axes. Huge. Enormous. significant. In my notes and going away, talk about recognize the knowledge. Recognize that not everyone knows what you know, and not everyone will appreciate having that pointed out to them. So don't try. All I can do and all you can do is offer to someone that's looking an observation as to what you see. Other than knowledge is experience. And maybe I would say that other than knowing is experiencing. And experiencing, I'm pointing to the kind of experience I'm talking about is the experience of the moment that you're in. Not the knowledge from what you've learned through experience, but experience is the moment that you're in. And it's having knowledge in your head, awareness of core new tension, that gives you an ability to reach for the most efficient way to move your body through space. Michael Miller, me, the person, just points and says, look, this is the way the body does it. The body engages in core new tension, and that's just a fact of the matter. Now, I can say that because I can feel that in my own body, and I've taught through the understanding of that to other bodies. It's up to you not only to make the leap that, oh my gosh, the core is really a grip, and the grip is really an involution, and it's in strengthening and deepening that grip. It's in strengthening and deepening that grip, being able to grow, to hold a grip closer to the axis. So why is that? Why do you want your grip closer to the axis? Because you're stronger. Because you have more control. It's a physics thing. It's the biology accomplishing the physics. So, there's knowledge and there's experience, and that you can feel the difference. In MMP, there's an experience. In MMP, there's an experience. Whatever else everybody else makes out of Pilates, or not out of Pilates, MMP says Pilates is an experience. And that opens up the whole way for you to explain Pilates and what the experience is and why it is and where it comes from and what's involved. You can introduce core new tension, which is the way the body engages itself to move through space. And you can then get to the definition of uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement, knowing that that definition came from the first three things. MMP explains why. So before I go, let's just touch on that. Why Pilates? And see, that's because why comes before what? Y becomes, I'm saying it wrong, Y comes before what? All this interest in what Pilates is, and everybody is espousing their view of Pilates based on the folklore that they've absorbed and are a part of, will have an individual answer and one tinted by whatever part of the folklore they're from. In MMP explains why by saying, explains what by knowing the why. So in order to explain what Pilates is, you have to know why it is what it is. Why comes before what? And in MMP, the why is what? If you've been listening, what is the why? Why do we do Pilates? Part of it, if not such an overwhelming part of it, it hides the other part of it. But the big part of it is that Pilates is an experience. And so that I ask all of you, do you find that to be the case at all? I mean, when you do Pilates, do you dive into your concentration and have an experience that you then lose track of, or you lose your focus, you come out of it, that experience is what's drawing humanity towards it. And that's so overwhelmingly the case that it can be confusing about, well, what is doing Pilates? Is it just complete coordination of being, thinking, and observing? No. It's the pursuit of the mat. Hundreds, roll up, roll over, all the way to push-ups. It's the pursuit of uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement, because that's just trying to explain what exists in the mat. So there's pulling your stomach in to be skinny, and there's engaging in oppositional rotation between axes. There's skinny and there's cornu skinny. Life can't live forever. Thank you for the time and the reality that we created together. The resonance, meaning the vibration that we created together. And I encourage you to share that resonance with others, because life can't live forever. Read between the lines. See behind the curtain. Connect the dots. You know, time is running. Evaluate points of view and then add 2 and 2. Go out and just sell a point of view that's beyond what is the norm. And look at all the students you'll get to teach what you already know about Pilates. Direct your thinking.